Hello, my name's Lonk. You may know me as the one who always picks sea monsters, and while that may be true, I also pick a lot of Finder. I wanted to put out a guide on Finder. It's my first video because I noticed there's a lack of Finder resources in the community. There's a lot of guides for many spirits, a lot of instructional material, but not a lot for Finder, and Finder is a very difficult and complicated spirit. And so I just felt that this was something that I wanted to change. And so, as someone who's played Finder into almost everything that the game has to offer, I just wanted to offer my thoughts in sort of a longer video format. So the video is going to have some structure to it. I'm going to talk about unique powers, tracks, that kind of stuff. It's not going to be a basic guide, so I'm not going to like read the cards, read the special rule, things like that. I'm focusing more on strategy, mechanics. Then I'm going to go walk through some example kind of lines of thinking and talk about different boards. I'm also going to talk about individual adversaries. I'm going to talk about powers that you want to look out for. I have a whole tier list ready. And then I'll also talk about some synergies among different spirits in the game. So for starters, I want to emphasize what is the best play to play Finder in like a few sentences. How would I sum it up? The way that I would sum it up is that you want to maximize your flexibility. You want to utilize your advantage that you have over other spirits, which is you have incredible control tools for not just invaders, but also tokens and presence, which is very important. And you also have one of the most honestly game-breaking special rules with Open the Ways. You want to utilize those mechanics to win the best. However, your biggest flaw is that you don't have any way to win in your starting kit. These cards just move stuff. This moves stuff. This isolates stuff. That's not enough to win. So you'll need powers from the deck, major or minor powers, in order to win. Most often it's going to be major powers because they're the things that just kind of wrap up a lot of actions into a single card, right? You know, you can think of it as like one major power that nukes a land is similar to like several minor powers that maybe defend separate lands with smaller numbers of invaders. They're the same result, but one of them's a lot more efficient. And so in order to support that, you need energy. And so you have to go top track at some point. So like you can start bottom and end up going top. You can start top, and I'm not going to recommend it, but you could go middle and then work your way back up to top. There's a lot of different track choices for Finder. I'm mostly going to be talking about top X3 because this is, in my opinion, the optimal setup for Finder. There are other ways to play Finder, and certainly I know a lot of people like to do top, middle, middle, bottom. There's also a lot of people that like to do top, top, bottom, bottom. And there's a lot of people that also like to do bottom, bottom, bottom. I have nothing against people wanting to play these builds, and they're fun in their own right, but top X3 is optimal into all but one adversary. So, in my opinion, it's the most important build to learn. Anyways, so with that in mind, let's talk a little bit about the spots in the presence track, some growths and things like that. So with like top X3 strategies, your reclaim becomes very centralizing. Because if you, let's say you take a top, top, top strategy, and then you're delaying your reclaim until you get down to here, that's like turn 6-ish, right? So that's pretty late in the game, especially since for most spirits, the game is kind of resolved around the turn 6 mark, turn 6 to 7 mark, right? And the game is solved and it just needs to play out. So it's pretty late for you to get quote unquote online. But if you do get to this point and you are online, or even if you can manage to get to here or even here, whatnot, before you reclaim, you have a lot of resources available to you, or this. First of all, you get all your cards back. Second of all, you get any energy income you already had, basic mechanics of Spirit Island. But the main thing is that you get another power card look, which is really important for Finder. Finder loves major powers. And you can ignore range this turn. You are the only spirit in the game that has a range ignore thing on their spirit panel. This affects anything in the game with an arrow. So this has an arrow. This becomes move infinity. Bargains of power protection is range infinity on that turn. Um, you know, this being range 0 is range infinity. This is range infinity. Like really, everything is range infinity. Every single thing that has a range requirement is range infinity. So utilizing that, that means that you have a lot of board coverage. So you don't have to worry about targeting at all. You in like a 6-player multiplayer game, you can be casting majors on other boards and or moving to other boards as necessary to create funky adjacencies or whatnot, and have that sort of long range support. You're kind of sniping the problem somewhere else. So this is a power spike for you and not a power fizzle. And that's really, really, really important. +1 card play this turn, add a presence range 1. So the downside is only range 1 presence. Upside is +1 card play this turn. So this growth is what you're going to use most often as you're going along top track, because you don't have any card plays. And playing 1 card a turn isn't quite it for action economy. There are going to be turns where you want to play no cards, turns where you want to play 1 card, turns where you want to play 2 cards. But on a lot of turns you want to play 2 cards, this growth is required and therefore sees a lot of play. So it also helps, let's say, if you end up somewhere like this and you want an extra card play, you just get that, right? You can grow to the any to get that any element you need while still having 3 card plays for that turn. There's a lot of different reasons. And again, this is just kind of reading the spirit panel, so I'm going to move on a little bit. Gain a power card at presence range 2. This is really beautiful because it's at presence range 2, so you can get full board coverage. But also gaining power cards is really important. We have to draft in order to find our win conditions. G4 is the only growth that I think is a little bit odd for Finder. So you can add presence to any land, so it's kind of like range infinity. But remember that if you have this spot uncovered and you reclaim, you kind of have the same thing because you can move your presence from one land to another infinitely across the board. So we're probably not G4ing for adding presence to any land. At least it's been very rare since I've needed that for that purpose. Like I think it's very, very difficult to be in that situation where you actually need that. However, the +2 energy is a button, and a lot of spirits have energy buttons like Lightning, Fangs, Thunder Speaker, and these energy buttons end up being important for certain builds. For Finder, 2 energy isn't quite a lot, so it's not enough to really warrant to do randomly, but I've definitely done it some turns to set up for a big combo. So it's important to recognize that it is still in your kit. Like if you're saving up for a cast down play and you technically the only thing you need to thresh cast down is like this, and some card plays of course that have elements, but fortunately you have elements like this and this in your kit. In order to have enough energy, you might have to G4 one of those turns, maybe. So just keep that in mind. You'll probably, like if you G4, it's probably because you need energy not for that turn, but for like 2 or 3 turns out. Is usually when I found myself needing to G4. But please tell me, about your adventures when you've needed to G4 for a specific thing, because I like to hear about it and I like to analyze Finder a lot. So. All right, those are the growths. Special rules. So responsibilities. Responsibilities has to be your action. So there's a lot of like weird interactions with certain major powers with regards to responsibilities. Some of the notable ones are like instruments of their own ruin, thresholded. So I'll go ahead and grab the card if you're not familiar with it. Okay, actually. Give me 1 second here, sorry. I'm just setting up a game. Just so I can have access to the major deck. Instruments. Okay, yeah. So instruments of their own ruin, the threshold. We really like this card on Finder because it's basically a Ravage skip that has damage attached. It's a Ravage modifier. It's not direct damage. So the damage done by the invaders is not your action, and therefore you don't pay responsibilities on this card. But some other cards, like, where's the search again? There it is. Melt Earth. Like Melt Earth into Quicksand is a card where you actually have to pay responsibilities twice whenever you push an invader in there, because the responsibilities reads after one of your actions destroys invaders. So with melt, you're like if that land has become poisonous or whatever, that is one action, and then the pushing into it is another action. So you have to pay responsibilities 2 times. So it's very weird. Like sometimes you don't have to pay at all, sometimes you have to pay twice. So kind of knowing on a case by case basis how this operates, we're very carefully thinking about it with regards to the rules, can be helpful for evaluating major powers. And so if you have any questions, please utilize the Spirit Island Discord and asking you rules questions. There's a lot of rules experts there that are really good at answering people's questions. And I think it'll be helpful for tracking responsibilities. Another thing with regards to Open the Ways is that it only works between actions. So you can't make multiple lands adjacent that aren't normally adjacent at once. And this is still active during things like events and fear cards, but you kind of have to choose adjacencies carefully. So just like make sure that you're not making multiple things adjacent at once, or that you're changing an adjacency mid-action, which is usually a mistake that people can make. So going over tracks here. So we start with this. This is kind of guaranteed for us, but sun is really important because it means that, like, let's say we play, like these 2 cards or something. It means that we're probably going to hit our innate. We just have to play 2 wind cards and 1 sun card in order to hit the push 1. And the push 1 is mostly what we're going to need throughout the game, because I'll talk about it later, but most of our strategies rely on doing a lot of pushing in the first turn or 2, and then backing off and sort of letting things chill out a bit and using only small pushes as needed, and then card scaling at that point. The 2 water space is fantastic. One of my favorite spaces. Like if you have this uncovered and you play, say, these 2 cards together, it's a very strong pairing because you have the push half round down, then the push 1, and you get nicely anytime you play a water. So also if you played like Ways of Shore by itself, because first tier of Open the Ways only relies on the first air threshold, you'll be able to hit this isolate, and that's really critical. But you have 2 cards in your kit suddenly that become activated with the Rightening, and then anything you draft that has water is also going to be critical. There's also a lot of majors that synergize really well with this spot. A really notable one is Sweep into the Sea. Let me grab that real quick. So with Sweep into the Sea, this threshold is really easy to hit. Like if I have these 2 slots uncovered, you can see that all I need to do is get a sun out here. So I just play literally anything with sun, and suddenly Sweep is thresholded. And this is not only a very strong card for Finder, but is essentially a better Jungle Hungers when it's thresholded. So definitely a really good card to keep in mind. Let me go ahead and put it on screen in case you're unfamiliar with what this card does. But yeah, easy threshold for Finder because of that water spot. There's some other examples too, but I'm just trying to kind of breeze through this for now. So these 3 spots are really fundamental because your hand is really cheap. Like your entire hand costs 4, and this here is 4 energy. And it's extremely unlikely you're going to be playing like 3 cards at all before you get to bottom track spots, which I'm actually missing a presence here. I'm not sure where I put it. That's kind of funny. I'll just go ahead and clone it. I lost it at some point, sorry. Anyways, before you start hitting these card play squares, you're getting 4 energy a turn, and you're probably spending like what, 3 max? Like, I don't know, the most that you could reasonably spending is maybe playing like these 2 cards together or something, and that's 3. So you're still going net +1. But if you play something like this, then you're going net +3. So like all these turns, you're banking more and more energy. So by the time you reclaim, like by the time you get here, you probably have around 5 energy. And if you went to here, you'd have like, 7 to 9. And by the time you get to here, you'll have like anywhere between 5 and like 20. Like, really. So um, it just depends on it depends on what you choose to do and what you choose to play, based on your drafts and stuff like that. But so these three squares are fantastic. Then from here, right, because the main strategy is going to be top, 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 middle, bottom. And from here, you can choose to go top again, which sometimes works out because the NA can be really critical, and also getting 5 energy a turn is a big difference from getting 4 energy a turn. Over the course of like 5 or 6 turns in a game, I mean, that's like 5 whole, 6 whole extra energy. So it's like a whole major power or 2 major powers that you could spend. Or let's say you have to pay responsibilities a lot for a card you're using a lot, like Power Storm Vigor. That means that you can do that combo more frequently. Also, the claw here is going to be useful for thresholding Vigor specifically, unless you're playing with this card. So, then for middle, it's usually a choice between these two squares, and the move presence provides greater flexibility and comfort in terms of presence placement, power targeting, all that kind of stuff. And is a little less punishing if you make a mistake, because you can always like move your presence to make a sacred site or basic things like that. The +1 energy range on everything is a square that's been growing on me quite a lot recently. And I think it's sort of one of those things where if you can get away with it, it's probably better, because gaining 5 energy a turn is just nuts. And certainly 6 is absolutely nuts. Like into the England matchup, I really like getting all 3 of these energy squares in the upper right corner, usually. And +1 range on everything is quite nice, and makes up for some of the lack of flexibility from not having this. The downside is that your presence placement is a lot more punishing, and it's harder to hit lay paths if you draft off wind, which you will often be doing because a lot of the best major powers in the game might not have wind on them. So let's say you gain one of these two. I'll just remove both for now. Then bottom, this is probably the first card play square you're going to get. And then from here, you would decide whether you're getting the any or the next play. Sometimes you get the earth if you're trying to threshold something specific. And that's basically it. I mean, more plays is fantastic because it means you can start card scaling, energy scaling, whatever scaling. You don't, or reclaiming, whatever. Once you've gotten there, you're set. So what squares do we never uncover? We really never uncover this moon. I think this is the worst square on the entire track, in my opinion. We very rarely uncover this as well. Sometimes this has niche uses to close out a game, but it's rare and it's situational, so I can't generally recommend it. But yeah, I mean, in terms of like what do you uncover, like these all get uncovered first usually before these. Sometimes again that earth has use, sometimes this has use. This one is just the one that's just very hard to justify, because all the moon really does for you, if you have this 2 water uncovered already, you're just getting the element, and all the moon does for you is that it lets you hit late paths on turns where you wouldn't normally. So, for instance, if I wanted to play like this, and I had this uncovered, then you can see how I hit the push half round down and the push 1. Whereas if I didn't have the moon, I would just have the push 1. And I think this can be overvalued by a lot of players, in my opinion. I think if you're relying on a lot of large, fast pushes, that might be a sign that some mistakes were made in early turns, or that you're playing at the wrong tempo, with regards to how the invaders are scaling. So, let's see. I think that's it. Isolates are amazing. I think everyone knows what's going on with this power if you're looking for an advanced guide for Finder, but I think the main thing that I want to highlight is that this pushes all 4 of these, or sorry, any 4 of these. And I know that like some of these things, like Beast's presence, often get neglected, and that people are usually pushing to Han and invaders. But it's important to recognize that pushing presence and pushing beasts can be really, really important in some niche situations. So, for instance, like pushing someone else's presence to combo with them can be really important. Pushing your own presence for certain board coverage on early turns can be really important. And also pushing beasts around into, say, Russia, I found to be very important because Russia is very centralizing around their escalation. And if you put the beast in the correct land, quote, quote, correct land for escalation, then it becomes a lot harder for Russia to have, more agency. And it just makes everything easier to deal with. Okay, so let's talk about setup and stuff. So we're going to talk about cards, what to play, what to think about, etc. So I like board C for learning any spirit, really, with the exception of maybe Fangs because the starting is so bad, or Lightning because the starting is also so bad. But or like Sparking Lightning specifically, sorry. But I think it's a pretty fair board with a fun puzzle for most adversaries. And I just loaded up a simple Scotland game here because everyone's pretty familiar with how Scotland plays. And so I just figured it would be a nice example, but I'm also going to go over Sweden. And I'll go over like tips on every adversary. Don't worry, I'll get to that in the video. But I want to talk about right now like lines, thoughts, how to how to resolve powers and things like that. So let's just say, for example's sake, that I got Mountain Explore here. All right, what goes through Finder Brain? Oh yeah, and I also might mention in a multiplayer setting, most of the time you're going to start on your own board. I know that Finder can start on other boards. You can put a presence in any land one, and sometimes you will, like with like certain pairings, like Finder Ocean or Finder Downpour. It's possible you'll be starting on another board, but it's completely board dependent and completely adversary dependent. Like before you flip that initial explore, you have to work out all the possible initial explores with your partner to determine the optimal placement of that one presence. And it's going to require sitting there for like 20 minutes and going through all these different lines. So that's sort of, in my opinion, the burden for determining whether to start on another board is you need a lot of careful planning. You can't just say like, oh, I'm going to start on another board, it's probably good. Because for you, starting on your own board is really important for your coverage. Well, let's say we got Mounts Explore here. Okay, so it's Scotland, so they have adjacency builds. So this means like if we pushed out this, Explorer here or something like that, it wouldn't stop the build here on 3. And also another thing to keep in mind is that Scotland's Explorer deck is that they have 2 stage 1s and then some stage 2s. There's going to be a stage 3 and then a coast, right? I think it's like 1, 1, 2, 2, 3 coast. And so I can make this a little bit more bold. 1, 1, 2, 2, 3 coast. And let me just double check that so I'm not lying to you. This is the coast, yeah. A little bit of a lag spike there, sorry. Yeah, so this means that when we're deciding where to put invaders, where do we dump plastic if we're going to dump, it's probably never going to be a coastal land, right? Like, Finder has the capability of putting all this plastic here in like land 2 really easily. That's great and all, but then what happens if you get Sands Explore here, and then Sands Explore here, and then Sands Explore here, and Sands Explore here? Like, you have many opportunities for this land 2 to be a really, really dangerous land. You're basically forcing yourself to not only draft a skip, but also, or like a nuke, but also to be able to play it potentially many times. And so we're not going to come up with strategies that rely on that. Coastal dumping is absolutely something we want to avoid on Finder. So let's first establish that. The second thing is think about the board geometry, right? So Finder really likes to Han since they're proxies for moving invaders or clearing invaders, right? Like, let's say this were Prussia or something. You know, if they built a town here, well, they probably wouldn't. They built a city if it were land 3 into Prussia, because they start with a town here. But let's just say, like, I don't know, Prussia without the starting town for some reason. Then, like, this land 3 can be solved by pushing invaders out. It can be solved by playing Offer Passage to have the Dahan trade out. It can also be solved by, like, moving invaders between Dahan lands with aid. And so enabling aid is really important to us, especially on the coast. And so these Dahan here being separated is a little bit painful. Not only is it a potential edge case, like, you know, things like cultural ASIM or, you know, just yeah, I guess that's kind of the main one that we're looking out for here. But if Dahan were grouped and on the coast, then it means that we have ability to cover both land 1 and land 3 with aid from Spirit Seekers. And if we didn't have Scotland 5 to worry about, we could also consider using an Offer Passage just to, like, trade out the land. So that's one thing that I'm already looking at with this Explore, is not really looking at the invaders, just the token setup. I'd really prefer to have these Dahan here to be more edge case proof and give myself more flexibility going later in the game. Another thing is that this inland land already has a town in it, so that's going to build into a city. This is going to build into a town no matter what I do. This land 4 has a beast, and it's also pretty isolated from the rest of the board. So, like, if I were, for instance, able to put all the invaders in here, this would be a pretty okay dump spot, because it could come up on all the stages, but it's less likely to come up the maximum number of times, or sorry, it can't, just because it's not a coastal land. So also there's more there's other reasons you don't want to put it in the coast, but you know, like, if I were to decide a land to put everyone into, it would probably be something like my land 4, because it's, you know, not very adjacent to much, and it has a beast in it as well, so the beast might start chipping away explorers, towns, whatnot. You can get, like, skipping actions in beast lands and all sorts of things. Although I guess it is in a lane with a city, so it could get destroyed by a city edge case. But if I didn't have the cities in there and I just had something like that, you know, like, this might get solved by the beast just naturally. So, you know, land 4 is, like, kind of enticing to put stuff into, especially since we haven't seen that Jungle Explore yet. Okay. And then lastly, you know, at least in a solo context, if I'm able to clear these 2 lands or isolate these 2 lands, then this land 8 is pocketed. You know, it's another important one. So with regards to this Explorer to Scotland, how do we address it? And I'm gonna, you know, kind of over-explain a bit, but remember this is a guide, so I'm trying to go through very slowly. So with the top X3 strategy, we're going to we're going to take this first presence here off of the sun, and we get to place it at range 1, because 99% of the time we are playing these 2 cards on turn 1. It's kind of one of the best openings we can get. This is a Circuitous and Wedding Journey, Past Type by Nature. Kind of one of the best openings we can possibly get, because the philosophy here is that this gives us enough pushing through this, the late paths, through the Cirque, through the Paths Tide, in order to sort of sculpt the board to fit whatever vision we have and deal with whatever's going to come up. And that will buy us the time to then maybe lay off and draft a bit, you know, and figure out other routes to the game. And into some adversaries, like Prussia, playing these 2 cards on turn 1 just ends the game. Like, if you can resolve these 2 cards and your innate in the, like, correct way on a good board, the adversary can't come back, and you basically just outright win the game right there, because all you have to do is draft and find an answer to a built-up land, and then you've won. Or just something that farms fear. You don't even have to clear it. Sorry, just grabbing a drink of water there. And so we're probably going to open with these 2 cards. There are some cases where you don't. There's some cases where you draft on turn 1, and I think these cases are niche. They're more common into Habsburg because of the way that the follow-up explorers can work out and the gathers work out on that board. But it can also happen if you're playing very specific combos. So recently, me and a very kind player named Arya played Finder and Fangs into Sweden 6, France 6, with Sweden leading. And that was actually a game where I played Pastime by Nature and drafted on turn 1, which was very atypical for lines I normally take on Finder. But we found that it was kind of the best option considering what the board state looked like at the time and considering what Fangs could cover and what I needed to cover on future turns and stuff like that. Um, so very strange, but also very specific. All right, so I went ahead and I added my presence here, and it's kind of because I know the answer for this explore already. Um, because I just I've spent time going through every explore into every adversary on Finder. But let's talk about where you'd want to place that presence on turn 1 and what it gets you. So first of all, we're never going to make a sacred site. Almost never. I'll say almost because I'm sure there's some situation where you might want to, but I can't really think of one at the moment. So I'm going to say you're probably never going to make a sacred site on turn 1. And we're also probably not going to add to land 2 because it's very rare that we need to control the coastal buildings in land 2 right away. And like even if we had Sands Explore or something like that, we can always get it the next turn, right? Like we don't have to get it right away because the next turn we can add here and push it out if we need to, or even just pull it out in the slow with Pastide. Like we can Pastide these 2 cities over here. Or if there's like a green on the next board, we can just give them the cities. Like it we don't really have to be there right away 99.99% of the time. Adding to land 4 isn't fantastic because it means that we're not covering one of each terrain type. Like we have 2 presence in jungles and 1 in mountains. And one thing we really value on Finder is flexibility into every single explore option that the deck could offer and every edge case the deck could offer, like the event deck, that is. And adding to land 4 doesn't help in that direction. It might enable a play that's necessary for whatever adversary explore you have, but keep in mind that disadvantage that you're not covering 3 terrain types. Because let's say we're in Sands right now, that means we have the option of using Circuitous and Wending Journey in the slow in in either 2 of these terrain explores. And if like Wetlands explored first, it means we actually guarantee Circ because the way the terrains work, they just have to explore into one of these lands. So that's something to keep in mind. Adding to 5 is similar to adding to 6 in that we do cover 3 terrain types. The main thing I like about adding to 6, though, is it lets us group up these Dahan on turn 1 if we want, which is a play I very often do because, again, I really value that sort of groups of 2 Dahan, safe Dahan positioning in my board, and the ability to use aid from Spirit Seekers in appropriate lands. So very, very important to me that these Dahan get grouped up. So, all right, that turn 1 now, though, so I'm going to go ahead and play these 2 cards. And into this, again, pushing out this Explorer, not very relevant. If I'm playing the 2 cards, I can only add here, 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 so I might as well add here and push this. There is a possibility of like adding here and pushing into here if I wanted to circ out of 7. But I don't think I actually want to circ out of 7 because I want to have the option of circing out of 1 or 6 if that Explorer comes up. I think I value that higher, especially the option of circing out of 6, than the ability to circ out of 7. So I'm going to go ahead and group up these Dahan here. And keep in mind, these 3 cards can be resolved in so many different ways, right? Like I could have pushed my presence here, could have pushed my presence here, and certainly if I resolve the build, and I'll just give myself a random explore. If I resolve the build, like right now, Pastide and Circuitous can also be resolved in many different ways. Like I could Pastide this here and then circ out of here. I could Pastide this here and then circ out of 3. I could I can the Sands cities into 6. and then Cirque out of 3 as well into 6 or something like that. Like, there are so many different options, and also especially when you involve like other board adjacencies. And so respect the fact that there are so many options here, and use that as something to empower yourself when you're learning Finder. Because understand that there are so many ways to resolve these powers that there probably is a way that gives you the most possible advantage into every follow-up explore and into every possible event you could get. And thinking this way is going to help really optimize your Finder gameplay. So looking at this a specific explore example, I have to consider it in lieu of like other options that I could take right now. So like for instance, on turn 2, I could play Ways of Shore by itself. I could play Offer Passage and Traveler's Boon together. I could play Traveler's Boon and Aid from Spirit Seekers together. I could play nothing at all. Like, these are all things that are going to follow up. But in general, if you want to boil it down to some easy combos, these combos, like this one is sort of a higher tempo combo because you get the fast pushing, you get usually a fast land solve, and you give support for someone else. I really prefer Traveler's Boon is support for someone else than like someone growing on your board to give you an extra push. But there are some cases where the edge cases are really bad, and so it might be good to call for that. But I would much rather prefer give the acceleration to someone else, because removing a building from someone's board is often game winning for them. Playing Ways by itself doesn't really give you any fast pushing, but it gives you that slow reactionary kind of access. And with the water uncovered, you get the Isolate, which is really, really big. Isolate is a very powerful ability because it counteracts a lot of dangerous events and explores in the game. And so, it's definitely something to really be thinking about. But, so we could be doing that, we could be playing Aid by itself, like who knows what we're doing, but we have anywhere from the fastest tempo option to the slowest tempo option. So keep that in mind. But looking at this board right now, already I'm thinking that the wetlands are really annoying. Like, sort of ignoring whatever could happen with the mountains. Let's just say I'm going to put these in the ocean for now, sort of temporary storage. If I do nothing about the wetlands, then they're going to build here and here, which is not only going to populate my board quite a lot, across a large area, but we kind of lose our potential to pocket if we want to, and also each of these lands is going to require an action. It's just slightly annoying, I guess. I don't like it, because also if we have to aid out of 5, it can only go into a coast, which is not my favorite, because we don't want to be adding invaders to coastal lands most of the time. So already I'm really tempted to move this explorer here. And the reason being is that now I have options on solving this. I can aid it right away the next turn because it's just explore, so it's not that scary. I could wait and aid it after it builds. It would still solve the land because there would just be one explorer left. I could also Ways of Shore it after it builds, and then I can push it into land 4. Probably not land 7, but land 4 or 6. So it gives me a lot of flexibility to make this play, and it's also in a Dahan land, so it's just like easier to work with in general. But making this play provides a lot of flexibility for solving the wets. So on that basis alone, like I'm really tempted to use Pastide like that. But remember, if you have a specific combo, like if you can dump your cities away, or if for some reason everyone's going to be clearing their coast like a ton, and you're worried that you're going to take Scotland escalation, you maybe then Pastide this just to make sure that you don't take Scotland escalation. Like seriously, think outside of the box here. But just like considering kind of classic solo gameplay, I'm probably going to pass from 8 to 5. This leaves me with Cirque available, and I'm kind of tempted to scale in 7 here. Yeah, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to push this here into 4 and push my presence out into 2. So remember that Cirque says that you can do half round up separately for all these things. So, you know, if this had one Dahan, this is a situation I love, is when you have like town explore, single Dahan. Now let's say you have a Dahan here. You know, or sorry, let me put this here. And a beast. Oh, this is like a beautiful Cirque land. So like I can push the town out and the explorer stays, and I can group up the Dahan, and I can reposition my presence and push the beast. Like, isn't that amazing? I just love Cirque as a card. It's just such a fun card, beautiful card. But anyways, keep that in mind, that you get that presence push and stuff like that. So I'm probably pushing this into 4 and my presence into 2. And the reason I like this is because my next step is probably getting these cities out of the coast, because I don't like stuff in the coasts. I'm very allergic to it. But also you'll find that the event deck and the invader deck is also very allergic to having stuff in the coast. And we want to make sure that we can soon prevent ourselves from taking Scotland escalation. So this gives us the option to like grow somewhere else. Like we can grow here if we wanted to push our stuff into 7 for some reason, or grow on someone else's board if we're going to push it off the board or whatnot. Like we don't really need to be in 3. However, there is an argument for staying in 3 if you want access to better Dahan events, because you're across 4 Dahan here. But I guess you could also just add to 5 at that point. So like I just like the preemptive positioning here because it gives me more flexibility. And I still get the 1 energy here, which is incredible. The 3 Dahan breakpoint is pretty significant though, because it gives us the reclaim, which would be really important for delaying our own reclaim. So, but I think this is probably where I'd end up personally. Then going into, and the reason that we don't solve 7 is, and this is something I want to talk about, is offer plus T-bone is a really important combo to maintain, because push half round up can solve quite a lot of problems. And it's kind of our main push that's available after we've used these 2 cards on turn 1, right? So none of these cards really push a ton of invaders anymore. I mean, you can combine like this and this if you need to, but that's about it. There's not a whole lot left. So these 2 cards can solve any land that has 4 or fewer invaders. So let's consider that there's always going to be an explorer there most of the time. So like explore town, and explore town city. I'm just creating a couple examples here. Oh my gosh, the magnetism on tabletop can be silly sometimes. And then explore town, city. Okay. So here, pushing even a single thing solves this land, right? So I'll just pretend that these are like a bunch of lands into these lands. So pushing one thing solves this. Pushing one thing also solves this, assuming you're okay with the potential increased aggression or what's it called? Accumulated devastation edge case. Here, pushing half round down +1 will solve the land, right? Here, pushing half round down, sorry, +1 will also solve the land. But here, pushing half round down +1 does not necessarily solve the land. So you can see that the kind of break point that we care about is having 4 things here. And so here, in our land 7, if it re-explores, then it'll have 4 invaders, so it's still solvable. But once it has 5, it will be harder to access. But we don't want it to have, we don't want to like just dump everything in 7, because that's too many invaders. Like offer plus T-boon doesn't, we can't deal with that anymore. So we would have to then draft a skip or some other major power. Okay, so this is a nice board state here. And then going into turn 2, we have a lot of options. So we're going to uncover this 2 and the water. And we can add pretty much anywhere on this board, right? Because range 1 we have full access to. And that's another reason actually that I really like adding to 6 on turn 1. I know I talked about the whole terrains thing, but it's also because you're just range 1 access to the whole board. So like if we needed to pass for the Wets Explorer, we could have. Whereas if we were here, we couldn't, right? So, wait, let me put that beast back. That beast is running away. So, on this turn, right, our 3 is looking pretty good. And we're already kind of ahead of tempo because we're probably taking Blight to scale on 7. But in land 5 here, right, this is going to build and just be like that. And we already talked about how there's so many different ways to solve this land because of this construction we've created. And so I'm really tempted as a Finder player to start getting greedy. So I'm probably going to play Ways of Shore by itself here. And I like doing this play on turns where I just want to chill out and draft and see what I get. So playing Ways of Shore by itself here is really nice because it gives us the ability to solve 5, or if a really nasty Explorer comes up in the coast, or we want to move these 2 cities, or whatever reason, like we can use Ways reactively after the invader actions, after we've seen what events are discarded and stuff like that, which is really important for us. So to decide what we want to do with it. You know, if we did something like Aid right now, we'd have to make our decision as to where to put these. And I'm not really sure that we can properly make that decision. Like if we put them here, right, and then we get Jungle Explorer, it means we have to invest more resources in the jungle than we initially wanted to. You know, this would explore and build, and that's 4 invaders. So that's kind of the magic number where we start needing Offer T-Boon. But then if Mountains comes up after, then we're going to start needing more stuff for the mountains. So it's like we don't really cover our land types well if we just kind of get rid of this from here right away. So we want more information from the invader deck. In terms of adding this presence, we could add here. We could add here. I'm tempted to add to a Dahan land because I want access to that reclaim event. I guess if I were playing purely solo, I might add to... Let me think. I might add to 3, just so that we might get some defense to mitigate an edge case in the Ravage in 3. So I guess maybe this push from 3 to 2 might have been a little silly because we were probably going to keep a presence in here anyways. And we might have had, I guess, the same puzzle, but whatever. It's still talking about useful stuff. I might add to 3 here just to mitigate because I don't actually think I need to be at 5. But if there's an event I'm not realizing, please let me know. So then here we get the Isolate with Ways of Shore, which is huge. And we're probably going to isolate a coast because we want to think about like what explorers suck. The Sands Explorer isn't so bad because we can still address land 2 really well because it's only going to have 3 invaders. Never going to have 4. And there's only going to be a single Explorer in 6, so that's not going to be so bad if we get Sands. Mountains is going to be pretty bad because remember, we're going to take a Blight here. And so if we get the Mountains follow-up, it's kind of annoying. Jungles is also slightly annoying because we now have a town in 4. So I think this Isolate is probably going in 1 or 3. And these are the lines that you want to start thinking about is what explorers could we get that would make us want to isolate one land or the other. But then we would draft on this turn because we get a draft, and we're pretty much always going to draw a major first. And look at that, we got the very best major in the game. You know, good old Garf. I'm kidding. Grant Hatred is a bad major, but here is where I want to walk through some lines, like how do you draft a major and utilize it effectively. So I have up here the major power tier list, and I'll get to it in just a moment, but I want to just talk about, like, okay, let's say I looked at this and I decided to take Forest because Forest nukes the dump land, you know? And I have this card now. What do I forget? I'm probably forgetting Pastide or Circuitous, because remember, we have to delay our reclaim, and we already don't really have enough cards to play. So like we can't play 2 cards every turn at this moment. And so forgetting a card from hand is not only bad because our uniques are generally overpowered and we want to keep them, but also, again, we just want to delay that reclaim. We're probably not forgetting Waves because it does something for us on this turn. And so we're most definitely forgetting one of these 2. And with regards to forgetting Cirque or Paz, the decision to forget Cirque or Paz is pretty dependent on what you value. So if you value things like elements that help you threshold Forest of Living Obsidian, then keeping around Paz might be important for the later game. If you value things like being able to reposition at range infinity late game on someone else's board, Circuitous is going to be a better card to have in hand. If you're worried about moon events, Cirque is the only card that really covers moon events. If you're worried about things like missionaries or aid from lesser spirits, you're probably not paying for remnants, but I guess if it's relevant, then the mountain is on this too. But like basically this card gets more late game value. This card has better elements. I mean that's really what I'm trying to say in a little bit too verbose of a fashion. Because moving 2 stuff in the late game just doesn't quite have the same kick. So most of the time, I find myself forgetting Cirque because I tend to draft for more late game oriented strategies to where I don't need Cirque. But there have definitely been a lot of games where I forget paths. And the reasoning for that is because Cirque gets that late game value. So in this case, like I can't really say exactly what's correct. I haven't thought about it enough in terms of if the Force Thresh is really worth it for this game. Because remember, it is 3 fire, which is quite expensive for us. It requires the any. And this explore pattern is already making me feel like I want to go here. So I think I'm probably forgetting Paz. Although I guess if I get missionaries, I would be really sad. I'm more sad if I get missionaries than if I get moon events. So maybe I forget Cirque based on that. So, but anyways, like you make that decision based on the situation you have and variables that factor into that. I'm just telling you what kinds of things to think about. But then from this point, I don't know if I want to play out the game much further. At least for this explore. And the main reasoning is it's going to start diverging quite a lot based on what this major power looks like if you draft it on turn 2. You could have also drafted on turn 3, and that's fine, but if you drafted on turn 2 and ended up with something like this, the game's going to start diverging pretty heavily based on what this major is, and based on what explores the adversaries have shown so far, and what they can throw at you next, what discarded events you've had. I mean, these are the things that all start factoring into your play, and it just gets too contextual from here, so it doesn't make sense for me to go through a dummy example as much. But I've told you about some card combos you can do, and I think the mantra is you want to maximize flexibility. Maximize flexibility. We want to make it so that any explore event we get is not that bad. We don't care about pocket that much, which sounds crazy for Finder, but we care more about winning into every possible explore and every possible event that we can, rather than winning more into like half the explores and then losing harder into the other half. So yeah, so that's something I just wanted to mention there. Okay, so it looks like I've talked about the cards a lot, talked about some opening lines, things like that. So now I want to start getting into some different boards. A little bit of board theory. Okay. Oh shoot, actually, sorry about the disorganized nature of this video. Maybe I should talk about major powers while those are still kind of on the menu, because I just drafted a major power for this cookie cutter example game. So let me just quickly talk about some majors here, and I have a tier list that I made. And I know it's like kind of small and blocky, but I'll mention each card, so you'll be able to look it up if you need to. So in the highest tier, we have Invaders Have Skill Issue, or Ultra Game Breaking tier. This is the tier where if you draft these cards or have the opportunity to draft these cards, the game is probably over, especially if it's your first or second draft. And notice that they're just prolife cards. Like this is Indomitable Claim, and this is Unrelenting Growth. Indomitable Claim is probably like the single best major you can pull early because prolifs are insane for Finder because they get us. They basically make it so we don't have to delay our reclaim. Our reclaim is actually in a normal tempo cycle. I shouldn't say tempo cycle. Wrong terminology there, but in a normal growth cycle for us. So like we'll actually run out of cards when we need to reclaim, which isn't normally true. When we don't have that prolif. We also get a lot more energy faster, which is really huge in terms of enabling a wider variety of possibilities for us. But Finder loves that scaling, so prolifs are just the best kind of scaling you can get. UG pretty much ends the game on the spot when you get it, and so does Indom. The reason Indom's a little bit higher is because Indom comes with the Defend 20, so it also comes with a free action, which is insane. And it can also function as a skip because the threshold isn't too hard to reach. The sun is pretty trivial for us, and if we need to, we can grab the earth here, we have the any here, we have earth on this card, we have earth on this card. There's lots of ways that we can threshold Indom if we need to. Then in game breaking tier, these are the cards that significantly warp the game if you draw them, and they are almost always like the best card in the draft. So Vigor is up here because Vigor is just already like an X tier measure power. Because it solves 3 lands, right? It's very easy for us to threshold because we can play it with Aid, pick up a sun from here, or sorry, not a sun. Don't even need any element if you're playing it with Aid. But let's say you're playing it with another sun card, then you grab a claw here. And like with Vigor, it's very easy for you to create large stacks of Dahan. Like if I, offer passage these Dahan here, and used aid like on a previous turn, and then used aid from Spirit Seekers to move these Dahan here, like this completely nukes whatever's going to be here. I can clear out this. I can clear out this. Also, you have that was the least efficient way to put those back. You also have a lot of broken adjacency stuff through Open the Ways, so you can like Vigor across boards and all sorts of stuff. It's absolutely game breaking. Instruments is insane. This is Instruments of Their Own Ruin, and it's because the threshold isn't very hard to hit. You just have to play it along with Aid from Spirit Seekers and grab a sun from this part here. And it functions as a skip, which is great because we'd like to have lots of built-up lands as Finder. And it also turns that skip into damage for free. So it's also pretty cheap, easy to support, absolutely insane. Like you can threshold this card as early as turn 4. Like ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. Voice of Command is also insane, mainly because it's very easy for us to get a lot of Explorers and Dahan in one place. So we can basically use this as a land nuke. And the threshold is trivial for us. It's like a 3 sun 2 win threshold, which has a gather associated with it. So you can solve some lands and solve your built up land all in one action, and it's like functionally a skip into like Russia and stuff like that. Weave the Fabric of Time and Place is incredible because you can make lands adjacent that shouldn't normally be. Like let's say I'm on another board over here and I have a Sacred Site. Like I could weave this land and this land over here and make them adjacent. And at the end of the turn, move everything over to one land. So it like is amazing if you are trying to combo with other majors. It also has insane elements for pushing. So often I'll like weave like 2 areas of different boards and then push stuff using the sun, moon, air into the weave land, and then I like move it into slow. Threshold's not too hard to hit, gives you 2 isolates usually with the water and the mountain. Beautiful card, insane card, sets up for a lot of stuff. Sleep and Never Waken is a 3-cost skip, and that's really it. I mean, it's just a 3-cost skip. It's absolutely insane for us. It also removes Explorers, which has great utility, and it has some elements as well, which is good for like moving invaders on those turns. This is Bargains of Power and Protection. It's mainly that it gives us a prolif, the threshold, and the threshold's not too hard to hit. But also that it saves us a lot of actions throughout the game, because you're turning your Dahan positioning into defense, so you can just push invaders into lands that have Dahan, and that's going to trade out. Cast down is here because it's so easy to threshold cast down. You'll probably need the any and you probably need the mountain, but like let's say you play cast down plus this card and this card, right? And cast down gives you this. Look at that. Just grab this on the any, and that is a cast down threshold. So absolutely super easy. You just need 10 energy, 3 card plays. That's it. You can even get the 3 card plays through G2. So really not that hard to threshold cast down, and it's very game warping major. Also comes with isolates and pushes. Manifest Incarnation is such a sleeper pick. Oh, sorry, I leaned back too far in my chair. It's such a sleeper pick. People do not know how good this card is on Finder. And the main thing is that let's say you have Sleep and Never Waken and Manifest Incarnation, and you just loop those 2 cards on a dump land, like every turn. So let's say you have 5 on your tracks. You're gaining 5 energy a turn, and you had like 15, 16 energy when you started this 9 energy loop. So that means you're going -4 every time you play it. So you can play it 4 turns in a row, and at infinite range, so you don't have to worry about targeting restrictions. And that giant dump land that might be worth like 40, 50 fear, you farmed it like 4 times. It's like 200 fear, right? So that's like bringer levels of fear. So you don't need to destroy anything, you just win the game. Absolutely insane card. Very safe, very reliable when paired with a skip. You can even just tank the blight sometimes. I mean, sometimes it's just worth it, you know? Like, the fear wins games, so don't sleep on this card. It's a bit expensive though and hard to set up. Then in S tier, we have Power Storm, mainly because it breaks other majors, breaks other spirits. Forest of Living Obsidian. I'm going to go through these more quickly because they're not as important as these powers. Forest of Living Obsidian it's a 2 damage to everything, which just clears out a bunch of towns and 1 city. If you threshold it, it's a land nuke. We like being able to nuke things that are in 1 land as Finder. Paralyzing Fright is just a cheap skip that has fear, so very strong. Infestation of Venomous Spiders. It's also a cheap skip that has fear, very strong, but it also adds tokens, which we like because it might synergize with other aspects of the game. Sweep into the Sea is amazing because it's basically a better Jungle Hunters. You use the bottom effect. It's easy to threshold, as I noted before. You use the bottom effect first to group up all the invaders in a coastal land, and then you use the top effect to just destroy them all. Game ending into like Habsburg. Just like the game is just immediately over when you use this into Habsburg. Infant Vitality, cheap skip. It's a little bit off element, so that's Inspire the Release of Stolen Lands. Absolutely fantastic for a Finder. It's not that hard to threshold, but you'll probably need the any to do it. Because I believe it's... Oh, I always check when I get the card. I think it's 3 Sun, 3 Water, 2 Claw, something like that. So, playing it with this... Right, so then you would grab the water from the any and then have it here. Yeah, so very often need the any. One thing you'll probably find is that Aid is amazing for thresholding majors because Sun, Wind, Claw, Fire is like very important for a lot of majors in the game. So this card, easy to threshold, and you don't have to pay responsibilities for it because it's a remove, and it can remove quite a lot of invaders. It's basically like a Vigor that hits 1 land and does 3 damage per turn. In a way. Bargains of Coursing Paths, it's a prolif, it saves you an action permanently for the rest of the game. Absolutely amazing. Exaltation of the Incandescent Sky is just an amazing power in general. Like, it often ends games if you can take it. And Finder can often take it just for free because they have tons of energy to work with. Like, it's not uncommon for top Finder to have like 15, 16, 20 energy randomly. and well, not that randomly, just maybe you underplayed on a certain turn or you banked that energy early in the game. And sometimes I've literally used this as a 7-cost slow to fast for like cast down or something. Like there are some really ridiculous lines that open with top track finders. So um, trees and stones. That's one where it's very good at solving small problems. And Dahan positioning is very important to you. It's a cheap card. You just damage all the invaders and have the defended land sort of trade out the rest. Very, very strong. Unlocks one I'm going to specifically highlight because this is one that I don't think gets used correctly a lot. Actually, was it in my draft? No, it wasn't. What am I? I'll just search for it. Unlock is very specific because its value is mostly not in the threshold, which is, I think, not what people realize when they draft this card on Finder. And the reasoning is, let's say you have this card on turn 3 instead of forests. This 2 are in your discard, and you're playing ways, and you drafted this card, and let's say, I don't know, you forgot paths or something. So, okay, then, oh, sorry, and you're here. Then next turn, you can play Unlock and any card to activate innates, so it's not a dead turn. You draft again to scale, so it's kind of like as if you were drafted last turn, but except it's very easy to hit elements. It's fairly cheap for Finder, like 4 energy is fine. You get a lot of elements in play for events and stuff like that. You get that card for free, so let's say we get Forest from it. It goes to hand. Then these 2 go to discard. And then the next turn, right, you'll realize that because we had something to play in the meantime, that we actually are in a perfect spot for scaling reasons, right? We can play 2 cards, we can then draft on this turn and play another 2 cards. So we're no longer underplaying on our way to delaying our reclaim. And this card sticks around. It has perfect elements. It covers every single event. Covers missionaries, covers sacred sites under threat, years of little rain, rising interest in the island, all these things it covers. So, and it gets late game value. Like if you get to the point where you have like 3 card plays and you play this card, aid, and let's see, let me take a look real quick, like this. Then if you have the any, you just grab a moon and it's thresholded, right? So this card gets late game value if it sticks around. It helps you delay your reclaim, which is huge. Oh yeah, it also gives you isolates on those turns. Amazing. If you played it with this, yeah, you get the isolate as well. Crazy. Oh, I bet it's even better if you play it with ways. Yeah, you get 2 isolates. Absolutely crazy. Anyways. Like it's basically a tool to help delay or reclaim. It's kind of like a Pot of Greed or card drawing effects in card games. It has a very similar feel, and you're often in a more advantageous card position. And because it can be forgotten for events and thresholded later, it retains that value. And so even though it's a little expensive at 4, it's often worth it because you're very rich as Finder. Then most of the things in here I think are self-explanatory. They're skips, just powerful cards. So here we have Solidify Echoes, Blazing Renewal, Fragments of Yesteryear, Flow, Vengeance of the Dead, exploratory version. I don't play with the non-exploratory set, so the base version of Vengeance is terrible. But Winds of Rust and Atrophy, Unleash a Torrent, Storm Swath, Transformative Sacrifice, Irresistible Call, Jungle Hungers. All these cards are very strong for Finder in various ways. People are obviously very used to some of these, like Blazing Renewal, Fragments, Storm Swath, this kind of stuff, Jungle Hungers, blah, blah, blah. So not surprising to see a lot of those there. And some of these, I'll just leave this here on screen for you to look at the rest of the list. But The ones here and below are just harder to make use of. They either cost too much energy, they don't kill enough stuff, like they don't destroy enough invaders. Um, they are too situational. They don't fit with Finder's game flow. Like they're often good, especially the ones in B tier. But there's things that we want more than that because they're just utterly broken. Um, and everything in the I have skill issue tier is like you never take it. I mean, look what the arrow is. This is on Terrifying Nightmares. This is push 4 explorers or towns. You are literally a push spirit. You will never need this card. Almost never. I have taken it once, and I'm embarrassed to admit that I have taken it once. But I mean, there are some that are also really low here that people often don't expect, like Rumbling Earthquakes and Melt Earth. Melt Earth is mainly just because you have to pay respects twice every time you push, and your pushes often come from multiple actions. So it's just kind of a weird card to set up, and it's oddly expensive. I mean, it's 6 energy and 2 presence. Um, Rumbling Earthquakes just doesn't really destroy enough. Like 18 damage to buildings is at threshold, by the way, because it's a hard threshold for Finder to hit at 4 mountain. So it's really 12 damage to buildings. It's usually not enough to deal with a dump land. I mean, in multiplayer games, I've ended up sometimes with dump lands that have like 40, 50 buildings in them, and it's just not enough damage. It just doesn't do it. So, if you have questions about any of these, let me know. I'm happy to justify any of them. I know there's some that are probably unexpected, like having Tigers Hunting here so high in B tier. And you're like, well, this card doesn't destroy dump lands. But it's actually because it's just a good card. It just solves a lot of actions. You're okay with paying responsibilities for a card that can potentially solve multiple lands. Because, again, you only need to solve the Explorers if everything is safe in the dump land and getting skipped forever by one of the better cards. Some cards like Ravaged Undergrowth, it's just because they're basically blight removal. Like, blight removal is essentially a skip but behind tempo. So it's okay to be drafting cards like that. Also, Dissolve the Bonds of Kinship. If you have a lot of Explorers in a land, this will actually probably nuke the land. So, don't sleep on it. It's just a little bit less efficient than some other cards. Yeah, stuff like that. So let me know if you have any questions about these. But this is just a nice little tier list that helps sort of lay out what powers I'm often looking for on Finder. And sometimes you will have, like, say, Manifest Incarnation and Fragments of Yesteryear in the same draft. And just because Manifest Incarnation is higher up doesn't mean that it necessarily gets drafted over Fragments. Like, sometimes for what the game you have, Fragments is what matters. And so that's what you should play, as Fragments, and draft that card instead. So don't just use this robotically. It's just a guide. It's just summing up experience that I've had playing the Spirit. All right, board time. Okay, so I love board C because I think it's very fair, it's very balanced, has an interesting puzzle. Land 4 is generally a very good dump land. And it's pretty easy to pocket the inland if pocket matters. And I like the terrain distribution. Boards I do not like. G is a terrible board. It's a terrible board on most spirits in Spirit Island. And it doesn't get any better for Finder. Mainly because land 2 is adjacent to everything. So Pocket Nightmare. The Dahan positioning are a little bit screwed up because wetlands can be a really bad explorer in a lot of adversary setups. Like, take Sweden, for instance. Wetlands explore turn 1 into Sweden threatens 8 damage, 9 damage in both of these lands. And so it encourages you to gather this Dahan out of land 3 into land 4 to help deal with it, which is terrible because then we can't have our Dahan parked in the coast like we really like to on Finder. So, like, there's that. There's also just that the adjacencies are really weird. Like, land 2 has a lot of adjacencies, and this land has a lot of adjacencies as well. It's just kind of too many adjacencies. We'd like to be able to cut off stuff. And it has bad setup rules into a lot of adversaries. Terrible board. Absolutely terrible board for a lot of A lot of spirits, terrible for Finder, don't pick it. Um, Board D is also really bad, and it's mainly because we have to start in lands 1 and 3, which are both wetlands. So we don't have the ability to cover 3 terrain types on turn 1. It's just like not possible. So you lose that advantage just on virtue of picking this board. And then also, if you can't deal with the coastal pressure of land 1 particularly well, it's adjacent to everything. So, like, it kind of compounds the problem. And it also makes for very swingy explorers. Like, if you get the wetlands explorer continuously into Scotland, it's really annoying because you just get you get town threatening city like every time. And um, yeah, there's other things that are weird about this board too, but just on virtue of that alone, it's just stay away, stay away. I think board A, I don't like. I know there are some people who like it, and that's fine. The main thing is just that I don't like how on turn 1 I find myself positioning my presence like this very often, so I have access to these lands. Um, just because land 5 is just usually not the land I really want to be in. I don't like how the board is like very much having these two kind of columns to them. Um, it just feels weird to resolve powers for me on this board, and sometimes certain explore patterns can be really annoying, such as like Mountains Explore, if you like were trying to go for a pocket or something like that. So, um, yeah, a lot of things I don't like about A. Oh, I think the main thing I don't like about A as well is that I have a Dahan starting here in land 2, and it's in a disease land. So there are events that will kill Dahan in disease lands like Toll, and so you have to worry about that from turn 2 onwards. But you know, again, we really like to place our presence on turn 1 to group Dahan. So like you know, we have 2 Dahan here, 1 here, 2 Dahan here, 1 here, and like it's very hard for us to get the 2 Dahan in our coast for that coverage. And because we have the Dahan in the disease land, it's harder to get it out of there really early unless we place our presence here. But we can't really place our presence there very easily on turn 1 because again, we need to place in 5 in order to have coverage of this. So it's just a bad board. Well, it's not bad because I've seen people do well on it, but I don't like it. It's not my favorite. So the best boards for Finder are probably like C and F and E. Um, B is fine. I think B and H are kind of in the fine category. You know, one thing that's nice about board H is that starting here, here, and here means that you have flexibility for grouping up these 2 Dahan. Like, and you can choose the mountain or the jungle, but also in 8, you kind of have full coverage of the whole board at this point. Like, you know, you can reach all of this and you can reach all of that. So, and you have 3 terrains covered because I'm trying to erase this. Sorry, 3 terrains covered because you're in a sand jungle and a mountain. Jungle Explore early though can be really annoying because like you can't just like add presence into 5 because you start in 1, so you're not covering those 3 terrains again. Or B is fine. I think you'll find it plays pretty standard. Board F is like kind of supreme. Actually, it plays really well. Main reasoning is that again it has that kind of favorable situation. Sorry, has that favorable situation where you have a starting presence here, here, and then often here, so you can group Dahan immediately. Like you can group these Dahan immediately, while also covering 3 terrain types. So, and you have access to pretty much everything on the board except this inland wetland, which is slightly annoying. However, even though you can't quite pass the wetland, it does have a beast in it. So there's a lot of events and fear cards. I know we're low fear on Finder, but other people might be doing fear. And events and fear cards that interact with beasts. So there's definitely odds for that land to just get auto solved or at least mitigated. Board E is an overpowered board on almost every spirit. It's without a doubt the best board in the game. And by virtue of that, it just ends up being a good board for Finder, often positioning here, here, and here. Um, this town is easy to manipulate. The beast is in a great spot. The Han positioning is really easy to work with. There's a lot of explorers that can get easily pocketed. Like it's easy to pocket 6 and 8 together. I don't know. There's a lot of reasons that board E is kind of a train wreck in terms of balance. And I'd recommend that if you want a good challenge, you should avoid playing it because it can really boost your win rates by quite a lot playing on board E. But yeah, in my opinion, these are the best finder boards here. These two are okay. Like I'll give them an okay rating. And I hate these D and G. There's a G is under here. No, absolutely hate them. And A is like, eh. Like, I hate it for the reasons that I described, but I know some people like it, so I'm not going to write it off. But anyways, that's kind of the boards on Finder. Let's see. So I've talked about cards. I've talked about openings a bit. I've talked about the different implications of some presence squares. Talked about majors. Talked about... All right, so I think it's time to talk about adversaries, and then we'll finish off by talking about spirit combos. Oh, there is one thing I want to get to. This is actually really important. Sorry. Is oftentimes Finder players on turn 1 will be using Paz Tide and Cirque to create big dump lands. And I see this a lot in public lobbies. People will be like just putting all the plastic in a single land. And that's fine, and Finder often ends up that way, but it's important to be able to choose that land carefully. And so I want to just highlight some basic aspects of the Invader deck. So let's say this is Sweden, okay? I think this is like one of the easiest cases. Sweden has the royal backing. So that's a land that, because their Invader deck is like 1-1, 2-2-2, I don't know if there's a 4th 2, then 3s onward. That royal backing means it's guaranteed not to come up in stage 1, and you can only get it once in stage 2 if it's an inland land. So like, let's say we had a royal backing in jungles here, then that would tell us that if we wanted to, we could just put all the plastic in that land 4, because what's the worst thing that can happen? Assuming you don't get Harvest Bounty and you're not unprepared for it, or some other edge case, or Diaspora, you didn't isolate it. That's actually a really important thing, is you should be isolating. If you do have a dump land, you kind of have to isolate it every turn, or almost every turn, to play around Diaspora. Is that like worst case, it comes up in stage 2, you don't have a skip yet, and just let it blight. Like into Sweden, it's just 2 blight. And that's it. Life will go on. But if you don't have an answer to it by the time you get to stage 3, you either had the worst drafts ever, or a mistake was made. And so, like, really be looking to note when the adversaries have lost the ability to give you a back-to-back, right? And that royal backing into Sweden is one of them. But even like Habsburg gets to stage 2 very quickly, and so if it's like end of stage 1 and the last stage 1 card is like this mountain, we probably don't want to take Blight to scale on the mountain, because if we get mountain re-explored, then this land's going to be huge and it's going to threaten a cascading loss condition. But if we saw like, no jungles in stage 1, then that's great. It means we can dump jungle, because jungle can only come up once in stage 2. And this is again why we never dump coast. Never have a giant pile of invaders in your coast, because it means that that land can come up multiple times, because we also have the coast card. Really important. Also, there's a lot of events that add buildings adjacent to lands with buildings in the coast and stuff like that. The reason people like to dump in the coast is because it's easier to get a pocket. But I'll tell you right now that the pocket isn't that valuable into a lot of adversaries. It's nice when it happens, but it's more important to be edge-proof. Again, you'd rather win all of your games than win hard or some of the games, right? Okay, so I just wanted to highlight that. So I'm going to go ahead and reload here. Okay, I want to talk about the adversaries really quick. So Prussia. Prussia is like a 9 out of 10. I think it's very, with a top x3 strategy executed really well, it's very hard for Prussia to win. The reason being that you get a lot of invader information very quickly. And remember, we said that dump lands are kind of a way of capitalizing on when the invaders have shown some weakness. Um, and This is really important in Prussia because they show you a stage 3 and a stage 2 before you get to resolve Paz and Cirque. So you should be able to identify a land that's just completely safe to throw everything into, and you have a lot of time to deal with it, a lot more time than you think. Also, um, like you have a lot of action economy right out the gate when you open with Paz and Cirque, and Prussia just kind of falls over to that action economy. You then just look for a skip, look for a land clear. You have multiple turns of drafts to find that, and the odds of hitting it are very high. So it's like a 9 out of 10. Like I'd give it a 10 out of 10 because it's usually very straightforward, but there is a chance that you just don't draw anything to get any fear, either destroying it or farming fear. So because of that chance, I'll give it a 9 out of 10. England is between a 7 out of 10 and a 8 out of 10, depending. So a lot of people don't know how to play England as Finder well because they're worried about the loss condition, and rightfully so. It's a scary loss condition that you can't just put all the invaders in one land. But if you play a strategy that doesn't rely on dump lands and plays more contextually, it's actually not terribly difficult, but can be really hard to optimize. And it relies a lot on having great draft theory and great understanding of tempo and stuff like that, and building edge cases that could come up. So I'd say the main thing that hurts into England is getting the double high immigration. And so if you're playing on a team that doesn't have fear generation, it's like a 7 out of 10 because that double high immigration can be really punishing. But if you have great fear generation, let's say you're playing with the darkness or something, then it's 8 out of 10 in my opinion, because it's not that bad. It's a very strong matchup. I think that can be won, 90% plus of the time in the case that you have fear generation on your team. So Sweden is also probably like a 9 to 10 out of 10. It's Sweden is very straightforward because the royal backing tells you like what land type is safe. Sorry, what inland land type is safe. Um, oh my gosh, here's another reason board D sucks. I just got distracted. Because in board D, if you get royal backing in wetlands, you don't have that juicy inland land information that you get into every other board. Sorry, just random complaining about board D. Anyways, so with Sweden, probably 9 to 10 out of 10. I mean, it's just a very simple matchup. You throw everything into an inland land that came up during royal backing. It can blight. It's okay. If it doesn't blight, great. You just have to worry about escalation. You'll group your Dahan well. Use isolates to block escalation. There's just nothing the adversary can do to scare you. France. So this is Prussia. This is England. This is Sweden. France is actually annoying. I'd give it a 6 out of 10. You'll find that with France, it's not because you don't have enough tempo to keep up with them. It's just because of the loss condition. Like, let's say that you put all your explorers into land 2, which is already kind of, not great because it's a coastal land. But like if you get an ignore disease event, you just lose the game, on a build, right? So those edge cases are really painful, and I've lost games just because of that, and it's really sad. So top X3 strategy is actually not that great into France right now. Hoping to optimize that further, but you have to play bottom for now into France to have that coverage, and it plays a lot of relying on minor powers and stuff, and basically just playing like normally like most other spirits do into France, which is just beating them with minor powers, good action economy, and good understanding of how to play off a slave rebellion. So things like defends, fast damage, even slow damage are great. A little annoying to play. Finder's not the best spirit into it. I'll give it a 6 out of 10. And again, you have to play bottom, so you'd open probably bottom reclaim. Sometimes it's bottom reclaim bottom mid. I've also had, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different options, but it's weird. And I am mostly looking to talk about top, top, top today, so maybe I'll make a different video on that in the future. Habsburg is like a 9 out of 10. Now, you might be thinking, like, Habsburg, 9 out of 10. I mean, don't they have loss conditions? True, but again, we're really only expecting to take maximum one loss condition in stage 2, and it's not that scary because, you know, there's budget for everyone to take one loss condition in a multiplayer game. Additionally, Habsburg often helps you because they gather towns into that inland land on that ravage, or into other inland lands to like help move towns around the board. So they often have like basically free actions from the invader for you, if you plan around them. So the adversary isn't that bad. They're a little, you know, a little sticky with the reminder card and stuff like that, but they usually fall over to skips, majors, things like that. Russia is like a 7 out of 10. I want to say it's an 8 out of 10 because I have a strategy that works really well most of the time. Even a 9 out of 10 sometimes it feels like, but main thing with Russia is the explorers are the main danger. And what you can do to counteract this is, in an early turn, like usually on turn 1, I find myself playing these two cards, Paz and Cirque, and I try to group up 4 explorers into a single land that has 2 Dahan, and then I use these 2 cards, Offer Passage and T-Boon, to dump all the invaders into that land, granted it's a safe-ish land, or at least all the explorers in there, and then use Offer Passage to save the Dahan and kill 4 explorers with the isolate that you get from this. Kill 4 explorers with that Offer Passage, and grouping all of those together usually means that you've eliminated a lot of early threat from Russia because you're probably pocketing, which is great because you're preventing explorers, you're destroying 4 explorers in one action, and you're just buying a lot of time. Like, Russia's not that scary when all they're doing is like exploring a relatively empty board. And another big thing you have going into Russia is that you do barely any fear. So Russia level 5 doesn't really come into play nearly as often as it would for other spirits. And this can be really beneficial because it gives your team more time to scale in order to deal with that Russia level 5. So I think to be careful, I have to give it like a 7 out of 10 because the edge cases are really bad, but it feels like it's much higher than a 7. It's just, I have to acknowledge that edge case. It would be silly of me not to. Scotland's also like a 9 to 10 out of 10. You know, the adversary just doesn't really do anything that scares you. And you're already really good at addressing the coast. It's already within your gameplay philosophy to do so. So, yeah, I mean, just play normal top to top finder into that and you're fine. HME is like a 5 out of 10. It's your worst matchup on finder. I can recommend a build into it. It's a bit random, but you basically go top, top, bottom, bottom, and you look for one of the broken 3-cost majors on my tier list. And if you get one, then you can win every time. But if you don't get one, you'll lose every time. So it's a bit it's a bit of a casino strat at the moment, and I wouldn't recommend it. But HME does a lot of things that are really bad for Finder. First of all, they threaten a lot of blight early. Finder really hates going blighted because a lot of the blighted island cards are terrible for Finder. You know, things that destroy presence every single turn or make you forget cards, stuff like that. Or just add a bunch of plastic that Finder's not expecting. And HME 6 makes you go blighted a lot because dealing with all those explorers is very difficult. And you don't really have any defense in your kit to help clear them out very easily. Like, you do have Offer, which is huge. Offer Passage is very big at dealing with the explorers, but that's basically it. I mean, HME is already a somewhat polarizing adversary in my opinion, and it's like really easy if you have defense and a strong kit, and it's really really hard if your kit is like slow to grow and has to take a lot of blight into HME. So I don't like it for that reason, but it's just really bad for Finder. Oh, yeah, also goes without saying the loss condition is just terrible for Finder. It's really hard to work around because with England we can work around it because it's just buildings, but here it's like blight and invaders combined. Just really tough. Mining boom also kind of counteracts a lot of strategies that you normally would do, where it's just adding like basically 2 buildings worth of plastic into like somewhat random lands. I mean, I know you get to choose the lands, so I shouldn't say random, but lands that are not ones you want to add plastic to, I guess. So this is an unoptimized matchup, but I am not very optimistic for it to get above a 5. My RNG build has the best results, but it sucks. I really hate this adversary. I hate this matchup. Just don't play Finder into this. It's just a bad time. Really bad time. It's okay to play HME combos. Like if you're playing dual adversary and HME is one of the adversaries, it's much better because it's mostly Mining Boom 2 and Empire Ascendant is where the primary like walls come in. Also the Salt card. So like low level HME along with another adversary is okay. But and the loss condition sucks, but it on its own doesn't suck. But yeah, so yeah, HME on its own is just terrible, absolutely terrible. I hate it. Yeah, that's kind of your matchup spread. So yeah, into Prussia. The I guess the tips are into Prussia prioritize coastal, then back-to-back explores, and then inland ravages. So you just always want to clear out your coasts because Prussia has really high coastal pressure, and that's where things can get out of hand quickly. And back-to-backs are important. Like always be thinking about getting that back-to-back explore and how would you deal with it, or how do you play differently to deal with it. So like one example is on board C, sometimes if you get mountain as one of the explorers on turn 1, you might have to push out that land 3 town because if you don't and then get mountain back to back, suddenly the mountains are really hard to deal with, and you might be slated to take a cascade in your inland land. So this is really important. Just always remember to prioritize that coastal back-to-back inland. And this is actually for every spirit, coastal back-to-back inland. This just beats Prussia. This goal will just always beat Prussia. England, it's mostly about England allows you to play at flexible tempo. Blight removal is strong. Skips are strong. Big damage is really what you need though. Like you need to get the plastic off the board. So removal, damage, whatever. You need to find it. But you get a lot of turns to draft, and it's okay to take blight. So just take some blight to draft, but you shouldn't take more than like 2. Sweden just falls over because of royal backing. France, again, I told you to play. You know, I advise you to play bottom trek into France and utilize a lot of smaller actions to win the game. Habsburg, they lose to skips, they lose to picking the right dump land, and they lose to big damage. Russia, you can utilize that trick of destroying explorers early in the game and then trying to capitalize later. With Scotland, one tip I might mention is that in multiplayer games, you have a lot of control over who takes escalation. So like you can try to arrange buildings so that the right person takes escalation, because often there's someone on your team who is sort of the tank in that game, and they should be taking all the escalations ideally. And then HME, RNG builds, best shot you got. So that or play with Ocean. And speaking of that, let me go through some combos. So Finder combos with a surprising number of spirits and does so really, really well. There's a spirit that accepts support amazingly. Like they are able to turn support into huge impact on the board. And they can often make exchanges with other players. So they can exchange solving a big problem someone else has in exchange for a small action for Finder. Because remember, one action for you is very different than one action for another spirit. So you are perfectly willing to move like several cities for someone in exchange for a small defend. Um, and it's just because it might be more action efficient in the long run to do this. So always keep this in mind. But in terms of good combos, I'll go backwards. DOE does its own thing. I mean, they basically just nuke their board turn 5 and turn 4, turn 5. I can't remember exactly. Um, and so it just means you can put invaders on their board. They don't really care because they're going to take a set amount of blight. They're going to nuke their board and move on. So they're a great combo for that reason. And like seismic energy and windsped steps can be good for you sometimes. And sometimes like you can exchange by arranging the invaders better for dances to take less blight. But I don't really find it very exciting. It's just kind of dances is overpowered, and you just play off of that. And dances is generally a very linear and uninteresting spirit. So it's just not my favorite to play, but it is strong, so I'll give it a check mark. You don't really combo with wounded at all. You, as far as I know, you don't really combo with wandering. You combo really well with gaze because gaze is often like one small action away from being completely solved in their board in the early game. And so Traveler's Boon is amazing for gaze because it pulls an invader off of their board that they want to get off of their board. Additionally, it pulls that presence onto your board, so you can ask them to skip a land, one of your inland ravages when it comes up, like your dump land or something like that. And so if you're able to make these exchanges and have this interplay, you should be able to basically go blightless into like a lot of really high difficulty content. Also, Relentless Gaze, right innate. The right innate brings back destroyed presence, so it helps. It means you can play more aggressively to pay responsibilities a lot for damage powers. It also means that blighted island events, should they be relevant, although this combo generally is low blight, should they be relevant, the blight, you're able to counteract that a bit. And again, Gaius just has that skip. They're just such a powerful spirit, and if you're able to solve problems for them, there's so much that they can give back to you. So definitely something to look out for. Darkness is actually a really good combo. And it doesn't work into all the adversaries, but basically the way you play it is, let's say, like a 2-player game, and it's like, I don't know, Scotland or something, is Darkness plays more aggressive bottom track strategy strats. So like the Reclaim Loop build, or like the full bottom build, or you can play the normal build as well, but it's not as potent for this. And you basically, Darkness dumps all their invaders in whatever dump land Finder has. So both of you are clearing your board so quickly that the invaders stop functioning, because it's basically like you just have a ginormous pocket. And Finder's really good at finding nukes, so Darkness doesn't really need to fish for any majors or anything to deal with it. Like, Finder's the tank here. They take stuff off of Breath's board, and then Breath returns the favor by helping solve small actions for Finder, while Finder just basically repeatedly looks for skips and fishes for that. It's pretty funny. Like, I've won against Scotland, like, turn 4 or 5 with this combo before. It can be really, really interesting. You pair well with Roots, but it's not really game breaking. It's just that like Roots just has some of the best stall tools in the game. I mean, they have 0-cost Vitality, which is basically a 0-cost any tempo skip. So they're able to deal with large built-up lands in the sense that it will never blight very well and prevent things like Hausberg loss conditions and stuff like that. So they can just take your plastic and they don't really care. They also can offer majors with the boon card. I forget what it's called. Yeah, here we go. Boon of Resilient Power. Although most Roots players tend to want to take this for themselves, which I understand because it fits their game plan. But basically, it just revolves into Roots tanking with Vitality, while Finder solves the whole game. Like, they just move all the invaders into the right lands, and they're fishing for big damage powers. And Roots is just farming fear. Well, that's one thing I wanted to mention with Darkness, is it does a lot of fear, that combo. But so good combo. Hearth Vigil is good, but it's kind of trivial to say Hearth Vigil is good because Hearth Vigil pairs well, like synergizes with like every single spirit in the game, almost every spirit in the game, which is partially just because they're very strong and kind of broken spirit. Um, so I mean, it's just things like Favors of Story and Season completely breaks Finder's Kit because it delays that reclaim. Um, Also, Hearth Vigil has like would love some small action investment from Finder in order to like arrange invaders in ways that are more favorable for their counterattacks. It's just something where like I'm almost certain that if the two spirits are playing like very carefully with each other, um, that they should be able to work out edge case proof ways to solve really, really, really difficult adversary problems, like even up through 6/6 and stuff. And again, Favors of Story and Season is so good for Finder, and Hearth Vigil is very incentivized to play it. So, um, and obviously with stuff like Offer Passage and Aid, you have great Dahan positioning for Hearth Vigil. It's just a great combo, but I don't like it that much because Hearth Vigil is just like broken with everybody. It doesn't feel special, I guess. Emberide Behemoth is fine. I'll give it a squiggly. Emberide feels kind of like Fangs when you combo with Fangs, because they're very good at solving small problems in exchange for you solving the big ones. And Emberide can deal big damage and land sometimes, and so that is an option. That's something that they can flex. But yeah, I mean, you basically like utilize the fact that they can solve small problems for you and save you from having to use your pushes and stuff on like newly explored lands and just scale harder. I mean, basically, spirits that can solve small problems for you, like Darkness and Behemoth and Fangs, let you scale harder. You draft more and grow more, which means that you become more powerful in the late game. Finder is kind of like a serpent in the sense that the more they get to scale, the closer they get to just basically trivializing the game. And so this is really important to keep in mind. uh, Downpour is an absolutely amazing combo. And that's because Downpour often has a lot of small actions to donate anyways. Um, and so, again, you have that hyper scaling, but also Downpour has that laser on demand with foundations, so they can deal with a giant built up land if necessary. Usually, what you do in this combo is you empty your board onto Downpour's board so that you don't have to invest any actions on a board, and you just 2v1 Downpour's board for the rest of the game. It's really, really strong. Me and Ray have played it, and it was, I think we took like one blight, and we had no edge cases available from the invaders. Fractured is broken, but kind of similarly with Hearth Vigil, Fractured's just broken with anybody. So, I mean, Slip is just a super broken innate. It completely, breaks Finder, and Fractured has great stall tools with Absolute Stasis. Dahan factories make things easier for Finder to work with because with Blur the Arc of Years, because you can move invaders around and use offer passage and stuff like that. More freely. So Fracture is just very, very, very strong. Starlight is a decent pairing. Starlights are not used to giving out Boon of Reimagining, but it's very good for Finder because Starlight is very tanky and can play very tanky in terms of like tanking a lot of invaders on their board. So you can just empty your board onto Starlight's board and then 2v1 Starlight's board. But if they do give you that Boon of Reimagining, there's a lot you can do with it because it helps you delay your reclaim that much more. And you're very often going to find good powers with Boon of Reimagining because it's a pick 2 from 6, which is much better odds than picking 1 from 4. But you don't need Boon of Reimagining for this to work. I mean, you just empty your board onto Starlight's board and then 2v1 that board. And again, even if you're focusing on emptying your board onto someone else's board, you're still growing top because it's good for both of you to be scaling into those big hammer major strategies to deal with all this stuff. Shroud is definitely not a combo. I mean, Shroud is a bad spirit. Stranded makes them a much better spirit, but there's they bring a lot of liability into the game when you play Shroud. And I play actually a fair bit of Shroud, so I'm not speaking as someone who doesn't understand how Shroud works, but um, Shroud has a lot of edge cases in their game plan, and they're not particularly tanky. And even though they have a lot of AoE damage, it's not going to clear out your dump lane right away. Fear farms are not worth it on Shroud, and things are just too tight, too edge casey. You're probably taking a lot of blight into a lot of really hard stuff. It's not worth it. Not a good combo. Nope. Vengeance is a very good combo. Vengeance is extremely tanky, so they can take very little blight while also having a ton of invaders on their board. This is mainly because they have a skip in their kit, but also some great control tools and things like that. It requires playing with a very strong Vengeance player in order for them to not take a lot of blight. And there's probably not that many people who know how to play Vengeance in that way because it's a very advanced playstyle. But people who understand Vengeance very well can certainly attest to the fact that this spirit can tank an unbelievable amount of plastic. And so again, it's kind of similar to like how you play Starlight, for instance, where you just dump onto their board and then 2v1 that board. I haven't done the lure combo that much. I don't know. So I'm just going to put I don't know. With memory, I'm kind of ignoring base memory because I don't find it that interesting, but and you don't really combo with Intensify, but you do combo with Mentor, and that's mainly because I'll give it a soft, small check. That's mainly because Mentor combos with anyone. I mean, giving cards to anyone is good, and giving cards to Finder is absolutely good, as we've gone through like openings and stuff, you might realize. The negative thing about memory is just that they have very little agency over their own board. And their board is often a liability while they're handing out the support. And so while they will be breaking you open, you will kind of have to dictate a lot of the game. When I say dictate, I don't mean verbally, I just mean through your play. Like, you'll have to you'll have to return on that support quite a lot. And the support is not necessarily as good as like the support that a lot of these other spirits can give you, like Downpour with Gift of Abundance or Hearth Vigil with Favors and stuff like that. Another thing with memory is, oh, I have some lag here, sorry. Okay. Anyways, another thing with memory is that a lot of people who play Mentor are not used to playing bottom track, which is generally a much, in my opinion, is a much stronger strategy than going top because you have more action economy to deal with your own lands and you hit elemental thresholds a lot easier. And if you need to go for majors, you have a +9 energy button to do that. You don't need to grow top track for that. And the thing though is that very few people play it that way, which is the way you kind of have to play it in that combo. So it's just going to be very rare that you're going to get a good memory combo, and you're probably not going to be able to do it into like a 6/6. It'll probably just be like a high doubles game or something. Many Minds is a great pairing just because Many Minds is also a tank. You can put a ton of plastic on their board and they're not going to take a lot of blight. They have great skips and great fear gen, phenomenal fear gen on that spirit. So Trickster's probably a pairing. I feel like there's something here, but it's just not one that I've tried. So actually, I'm really interested to lapping this one out. A Stone gets 2 checks. It's probably one of your best pairings, because you know what? I'll give Downpour 2 checks as well because that one's insane. I'll give Gaze 2 checks. Give Hearth Vigil 2 checks. Yeah. Stone gets 2 checks. I mean, Stone is just the best solo spirit in the game, and it can just tank anything in very edge case proof ways. You don't have to worry about loss conditions and stuff. Stone's kit just ignores that. And when I say that, I mean like Habsburg loss conditions. And also, like when invaders ravage, they basically nuke themselves with Stone. So you just dump stuff onto Stone's board and 2v1 Stone's board, and they probably don't even need that much of your help. So it's an absolutely absurdly broken pairing. So if you want a very easy game into 6/6, play with Stone. Volcano is a combo, but people I think often play it very incorrectly, and it can be frustrating for them because like invaders will kind of get out of hand. So, um, the reasoning behind this is because people will often play to dump inside the middle of the volcano, and this is not a good strategy because volcano does have a lot of damage in a single land, but they don't want to necessarily be using all their actions doing that, and they'll often be very low on presence in that land if they do. So um, you're holding Volcano back from scaling in ways they want to, just to like do a bunch of damage in one land. And they don't have enough damage to deal with all the plastic you can put onto them. So it's just overwhelming for Volcano to do that. What you want to do instead is dump right next to Volcano so that they're not in danger of having all that in their main homeland. It's still close enough to them where they can deal lots of damage if need be. And then there's also like the fact that Volcano is scaling really hard with energy and majors. You are scaling very hard with energy and majors. There's an energy boon and a range boon. What's it called? Um, Exaltation of Molten Stone. Target spirit gains +1 range with their powers that originate from the mountain. So you get range very early in the game, which can be really, really good in terms of coverage for Finder. Um, because, +1 range on Finder means that, again, everything that comes from your kit is at an extra range. So you can target Cirque farther away, or you can, bargains farther away on that turn, or move your presence range too, or whatnot. Um, but the energy is also really huge. I know Finder's rich going top track, but you're never going to turn down more energy. You can always do more broken stuff with more energy. I haven't played the Serpent combo. I just don't know. I imagine not, though, because Finder's presence is really valuable. Um, so it's kind of bad to be absorbing it. So yeah, Finder Wildfire is very strong. It requires a very strong Wildfire player, and I'm kind of ignoring base here because I just don't find base to be nearly as interesting as transforming. Transforming is very good for Finder because it helps delay their reclaim and gives them critical elements at certain turns. It's also, again, blight removal. You solve lands for free with the beast creation. There's all sorts of really, really great stuff from transforming. And Wildfire, when played really well, can tank quite a lot on their board, but it's going to revolve around like very non-traditional Wildfire strategies, and it requires a very seasoned Wildfire player in order to manage that. You do have access to the Destroy All Invaders with the 7 Fire, which sometimes might be the call, but it's mainly just that you power up Finder with that support, and you also can solve a lot of problems for Wildfire that would normally be annoying for them, because you're just very good at solving like simple problems on other boards and built up problems on other boards as well. Like the land 2 is a big liability for Wildfire, so like this is a combo where I think you would dump things from Wildfire's board, like you would remove stuff from their board and put it on your board, and then they would try to solve a bunch of small problems for you. And additionally, um, what was I gonna say? Oh yeah, pushing around Wildfire presence is really fun because you get to push beasts and Dahan with it because you activate Wildfire special rule, and you don't have to pay respects for anything that you do damage to or destroy because it's not your action. So there's a lot of like amazing Dahan positioning mini games you can play pushing around Wildfire presence, and it's super fun. I often call it having a little pet Wildfire because you kind of look like a happy deer pet. The Fangs combo is very good. It's actually 6/6 viable, but I don't know how to play it very well from the Fangs perspective because I've always just played with Fangs players who specialize. Um, but the idea is just that Fangs can solve a lot of small problems for Finder, and then Finder deals with the big problems and hyperscales. Again, similarly to Behemoth, you're enabling hyperscaling on Finder because they don't have to invest actions into solving those small problems. So very strong combo, 6/6 viable, but Fangs just isn't quite good enough to hang past some of the easier 6/6 combos. Keeper is good. Power Boon is really, really, really good for you, and Keeper's just generally an extremely strong solo spirit, so even just receiving the Power Boon from Keeper and then returning it in some other exchange is usually enough to like win a very difficult game. So Finder Ocean gets 2 checks, absolutely broken combo, completely busted. It's very hard to play. And it often revolves around very weird rules for Ocean, where you'll have Ocean's presence be inland sometimes because you can push your presence into the ocean and therefore make anything adjacent to the ocean coastal, like all sorts of weird, wacky stuff. But the main thing to keep in mind is that one, you're trying to empty Finder's board as quickly as possible. Two, all of Ocean's actions are essentially yours. So, like, Ocean offers town pushes, title boon. They offer defend 4 on a coastal land. They can eat explorers with Call of the Deeps. And all these things are meant to hyperscale Finder. And then once Finder's hyperscaled, you're 2v1ing Ocean's board for the victory. The opening for Ocean with this combo, just because it's like such a specific combo with Finder Ocean, is Ocean G2 bottoms and probably plays I forget Ocean cards. Give me a sec. I remember them kind of by the picture. Yeah, they have to play Title Boon on turn 1. It's the only one they have to play. And then they're probably playing Swallow the Land Dwellers or Call of the Deeps together with that. I think most often they're playing these 2 cards on turn 1. So they're giving Finder 2 energy so that they can pay respects on turn 1 while pushing things in the ocean. And then Finder has to get their presence in the ocean on turn 1. Then they have 2 drown actions, so they're solving some more plastic on Finder's board. Oh yeah, and also you're getting a 3rd town. So you're getting like 2 towns, 3 towns from Ocean. Then you're also getting Title Boon from Ocean to push more stuff into the ocean. Like you basically emptied the setup rule into the ocean already, or at least put it all into coastal land into most adversaries. And then you'll drown it immediately after with like Offer T-Boon. And then the next turn, you'll probably be playing these, and you G3 bottom. And the big mistake that Oceans make here is that they'll try to get a major because they'll have a lot of energy. You don't want to get a major quite yet because you don't want to forget any of your unique powers because they're all really critical to accelerating Finder still. So you grab a minor power here just so that you have like some other action and something to forget. You can play it, choose not to play it, whatever on this turn. Underplaying is completely fine. And then you're probably reclaiming a lot after that. Like reclaim G3, oscillating between the two. And one of the main things to keep in mind is that when you isolate the ocean as Finder, then the invaders can't explore on the coast if that board is empty. So you want to alternate, let's say it's not Scotland, you want to alternate between Finder isolating the ocean and then Ocean playing Call of the Deeps to pull in those explorers so that basically no explorers can ever happen on Finder's board. And so as long as you alternate between the two, you pretty much perfectly cover everything. Absolutely broken combo. Like you will trivialize 6/6s with this combo when played correctly. And you might also question, this is an interesting one. There's like you might question like, okay, if the goal is to dump everything in the ocean, why do I still go top track on Finder? Why don't I go other tracks that have higher pushing potential? The main answer to that is one, you don't need it. Like, you should not need that level of pushing in order to empty Finder's board into the ocean. And when you're 2v1ing Ocean's board, it's going to be really critical to have access to those majors and stuff like that in order to solve big problems that are going to be building up while you're clearing Finder's board. Additionally, you still have really good pushing available left over after you've emptied Finder's board. So it's like, why not take that energy scaling? Because you're just in like kind of an objectively more powerful state later in the game if you took that opportunity to scale while also clearing your board instead of just like investing in more push tools. Because then you're also making it much tighter and much more reliant on Title Boon in order to win the game because you're just going to need energy constantly when you're pushing stuff in the ocean. So, yeah, it's not It's not a pairing where you want to play bottom or middle. Absolutely still want to play top. It's very potent. You'll dumpster 6/6s with this combo. It's very fun, very interesting. A lot of interplay between the two spirits. And remember, it's kind of one where I think the Finder has to kind of take the reins a little bit, because Finder is more aware of what actions they have available and what they can do. And there's not a lot of people who understand Finder like really in depth. So it's unlikely that the Ocean player is going to, just statistically unlikely that the Ocean player is going to know like exactly how your gameplay flow works and like what you can do on certain turns. And so it works out easier if the Finder's more dictating how the Ocean's actions interplay with their own actions. But it's going to be a lot of like discussions and working out exactly what's going to happen. And certainly you don't want to just like force this combo on someone and like backseat it, because that's, you know, not a fun way to play any board game. I'm just talking about like sort of what might be necessary. And usually I play you know, I've played this combo before with Ray, who's a very experienced player, and you know, like that's a case where we both, you know, have played a lot of Finder, and so you know, it doesn't quite end up that way, and also we're just sort of looking to play to be efficient and you know, win the game, and so we're not so worried about exactly like what's necessary to do that. But I will recommend for Finder Ocean to be fun for people you want to play with. Make sure that they kind of are aware of what they're signing up for as the Ocean player. Um, so, Bringer of Dreams and Nightmares. Nah, nah. I want to give it a check because it's really fun when you have a lot of invaders in one land and Bringer just farms like hundreds of fear off of that. And it can happen, and it can win the game. But Bringer's a little bit too tight to deal with that level of plastic. And so it's probably better that you're both playing, like, you're probably pulling stuff off of Bringer's board for Bringer while Bringer scales to try and find majors to do fear. But it's a little volatile. Like, you're still looking for skips and stuff like that, and the actions don't line up fantastically. Um, I'm going to give it an X. However, this is one that I think could be a check with more work. And so I'll give it like a check X, and I encourage people to try and lap it out, figure it out, and I'll certainly look into it at some point. But at least usually my combos with Bringer have been like in a 6-player multiplayer game, I enable Bringer to do a 200 fear turn or something like that. And not that there's actual like careful interplay between the two spirits. Green is a double check. Prolif is insane for Finder. Green just offers free skips. Regrowth Green is even better at that. You just dump everything onto Green's board and then search for majors to win the game. Thunder Speaker is like a small check. This combo plays really weird and has a lot of like careful turn planning, and it's not that potent because Thunder Speaker doesn't start with that many like great damage potential. That much great damage potential. Because Manifest is a little bit of an overrated card for damage. There's a lot better options in the major deck. So it just plays a little bit weird. I mean, typically what happens is you're pulling a little bit of stuff off of Thunder Speaker's board. Thunder Speaker then cleans up their board quickly and then comes onto your board, which is fine. But they don't quite have the same like small problem action economy potential as like Fangs does, so it doesn't get as big of a check. Base Vital is just so boring that I would never pair with it, but Nourishing is really strong pairing because it's kind of like Roots. They have Vitality, and you can dump anything into a Vitality land, and that's fine. Like, Nourishing Vital has tons of blight removal and Vitality, so they're extremely tanky, and they have a lot of card find as well. Shadow's just not really it. Shadows just isn't good enough of a spirit. Lightning isn't it for all their aspects except for Sparking. Sparking is really good. It's a very strong lightning aspect in general, but basically, Sparking can enable some hyperscaling on Finder by giving them Sparking on critical turns. So you can play like 3 cards on turn 1. Or sorry, not turn 1, turn uh, turn 2, or you can play you can play extra cards or give them drafts and things like that to help make it so that Finder doesn't have to forget their strong unique powers. Sparking also has a lot of small action economy to give, especially if they go bottom track. So they can solve small problems for Finder and enable that scaling. River's really good. Similar reasons. They solve small problems for Finder, enables Finder scaling. Finder takes over the game after that. Sunbright is the same thing. So they also get a check. Rising Heat has a skip, and they can make invaders have -1 health. Very tanky spirit, so totally works. Mud's not quite it. I know they have a card that gives you a draft, which is very enticing, but I've tried this combo many times, and it just doesn't quite feel like it. Ice Watch from Trees mostly wants to play on their own. I think they mostly just dumpster their own board, and they're not really looking to donate tons of actions. Teeth is... Teeth needs an aspect. So yeah, those are kind of all the combos that I was thinking. I talked about a little bit how they play. And I think I've covered pretty much everything I want to cover here. Let me know if there's something I've missed, because I'm happy to go into really specific like explore setups on different adversaries, or how to utilize different powers, or go through more example games, and like I can play them out in full um, rather than just in part. And I think the main thing to remember on Finder is that it's a contextual spirit. The spirit is best played contextually, and this is what I want to close with. Meaning, they don't really have something that you can point to on that turn and say this is 100% optimal. They'll have a lot of options that are fine. And this is very distressing for a lot of players because they always want to know, like, what's the optimal play? What's the optimal play? And with Finder, it's like all of your previous decisions influence what the correct decisions currently are, you know? And because of that contextuality, it's really hard to say exactly what's optimal on Finder every turn. I recommend trying to intake as much information as possible, like what's going on other boards, what are the spirits are you playing with, what support is available, what majors are in the major power discard, what have you passed up, what invader explorers have happened, what invader explorers could happen, like you're not going to know exactly what you're going to play on every turn. It's not like turn 1 looks very similar a lot of the time, but I can't tell you like what you play on turn 2 or what you play on turn 3 or even what you do after this spot, whether you go here, here, or here and what you play on those turns. And, this is why I didn't want to play out a full game, is just because it's mostly a guide and I'm talking about thoughts and, strategies and stuff like that. And if you want, I can post some example games, but those are more contextual. That's where the variables have gotten more specific. And what is optimal is very, very, very contextual. So keep that in mind. Keep that in mind. If you want to practice Finder and like want to break into Finder, what do I recommend? I recommend that you grab a board you really like. In fact, grab board C. I think board C is very balanced and very fun. And load up an adversary and just plan for every single explorer. Like take an opening explorer, like I did, for instance, into Scotland, like board C mountains. Okay, great. Then go through every turn 1 explorer and turn 2 explorer. So that's, four things for turn 1 and 4 things for turn 2. So like 16 total combinations. Go through all those combinations. I know it's really tedious, but go through every single one and develop familiarity for like exactly how to deal with all of them in the best ways. And try to deal with them in a way that gives yourself flexibility to solve those problems later. And makes it so that the worst possible edge case isn't so bad. That's the main thing you got to think about. If you play in a way that loses really hard to like a certain explorer or a certain set of events, then eventually you're going to get those explorers and those sets of events, and it's going to be really tough. So, but yeah, find a contextual spirit and needs to be played that way. I hope you have a great time playing Finder. I think they're a really fun spirit, and Certainly, if you have more questions, let me know. And if there's more material that I can post to be helpful, let me know. I'm very interested in the spirit, and I like it a lot. I wanna make sure there's some Finder resources out there for the community. I feel like there really was a lack of Finder resources before. But anyways, signing off. Thanks for watching the guide.